I'm Mariah Garcia. I am currently a sophomore right now, and I am going to school for psychology and hoping to become a professional therapist one day. And today I will be going over the psychology of user interface design. Some of the topics I'll be going over today will be the cognitive load, principles of user interface, perception and attention, emotional design, and real world examples. So, what is cognitive load? Cognitive load is just the mental effort required to process information. How can you reduce cognitive load? You do this by having clear information hierarchy, which guides users to know what is the most relevant information for them. Having a consistent design or pattern throughout the interface. Providing feedback, limiting the choices for users. Having guided interactions, and etc. Now, why is this important for user interface designers to know? This is important to know so designers can ensure users are efficiently retaining information without straining too much mental effort or without struggling to remember the information that is being provided. Now, some of the principles of user interface. Some of them include the principle of less effort, which is just users finding the simplest way to complete a task. Principle of perpetual habit, which is when individuals rely on the routines, habits, and memory when handling a task. Principle of emotional contagion, which is when individuals unconsciously adopt the behavior and share the emotions of those around them. And then we have principles of beauty and aesthetic, which is when people usually tend to gravitate to what is more pretty or aesthetically pleasing. And we have an example of this on our right. Um, the top image, they're both the same pictures in those, but the one on the right just looks more aesthetically pleasing compared to the picture on the left. And that just makes users want to go to the design on the right compared to the one on the left. And then on the image on the bottom, that one's just really aesthetically pleasing and it makes you want to read the information and makes you want to have this car. So those are just some examples of the principle of beauty slash aesthetic. And then we have some other ones. We have the von Restorff effect, which is when if there's a group of objects and one of the objects in there stand out compared to the others, that one's usually going to be deemed more important or people will remember that one more than the others. And then we have Hicks law, which is when the more options that are given, the longer it will make a decision, which is why it is very important to limit some of the choices that are being provided. And then we also have Miller's law, which is when that's just the average person can remember up to 5 to 9 things in short-term memory, which is why it's important to not overload users with too much information. Now, why is it important for user interface designers to apply them to their designs? It's important for them to apply these to ensure they are creating a user-friendly interface, making the users to come back to their website or their product. Now, for perception and attention, how is the Gestalt principles applied to perception and attention? Now, the Gestalt is just 6 principles that describe how people perceive visuals and group them. And some of these include similarity, which is when elements perceived as similar are grouped together. This includes size, shape, and color, and etc. Then we have continuation, which is when the human eye is drawn to continuation like paths, lines, or curves. And then we have closure, which is when the human's ability to fill in the missing piece to complete a design. We have proximity, and this just depends on the proximity of an object, where people tend to group or categorize the elements that are there. We have figure ground, which is how individuals differentiate what is either in the foreground or the background of a design or of the interface. And then we have symmetry and order, which is when the mind groups the objects that are symmetrical to one another. Now, What are some other ways user interface designers can manipulate the user's perception and attention? They can do this through visual hierarchy, as this can be done by having bold text, color contrast, white space, font hierarchy, and etc. This helps individuals navigate the user interface, making it easier to find information without struggling to find it. And the image on the left are just some of those ways visual hierarchy are can be used. Now, how can color influence users' perception and attention? Now, colors, they evoke emotions for everyone, subconsciously at least. And we can see this with the color red. If we see a bright red, our minds will correlate it with either something that is extremely important or something that we need to be cautious about as it can potentially be dangerous. And then this is also applied with some other colors as well. With yellow, it can be correlate with joy or happiness, and same thing with blue or like a darker blue, that can also correlate with sadness. Now, this subconsciously evokes different emotions, which very much affects the interactions users have with the interface in general. Now, emotion design, how can an individual's emotional connection influence their interaction with an interface? Now, this can play a huge role, which is why they always try to aim for positive interactions, as this can affect a company's success and increase rates. Now, what are three levels of emotional responses according to Don Norman? Three levels of emotional responses are visceral design, which is based on a person's initial impression of a product. This can also be known as like a person's gut feeling. Behavioral design, which is based on the usability and performance of a product. And lastly, reflective design, which is based on the meaning and personal connection on how the product will make them feel and how they will be perceived when using the product that is there. Now, how can this influence a user's decision making? Designers can influence users in taking a certain action that can benefit the product or their website as a whole, depending on what it is. They can do this by visual cues, testing design with the users to get feedback, making that emotional connection that a lot of users need to make them feel like they need that product or a certain outcome. And they can do this through having stories on something that they can relate to, something that they can heavily feel and be like, I need to support this or I need to get this for myself. So those are just some ways they can influence a user's decision making. Now for the real world examples, how can user interface designers apply these into the real world? They can do this by gaining trust from the users and through trial and feedback. Now, how can user interface designers gain the trust of their users? They can do this by having basic design elements, standard buttons, or menus, which very much helps build that trust through familiarity. You can also by providing clear error messages and information that may help them fix the problem on what is going on. And also another big one is just by being fully transparent with your users, especially if you're a company, you need to be transparent about the company's practice and what they do with the user's data. And all of these are just ways user interface designers can gain trust with the users, which is very important and very crucial for them to do, especially when it comes to an interface. Now, is it important for users to give feedback about the interface? Yes, 100%. It is extremely important for users to give feedback, as designers need this to make sure that the users are satisfied, and this can help them know if they need to improve the product or design to ensure user satisfaction. If users don't give back feedback, there is very low chances and there's no way that they can actually know if something's wrong with the product or if there's an error in any type of way or form. So it's just very crucial that users and individuals give back feedback um, about either the interface or the product because this can very much affect a company's success rate. And that is all I have for today. So thank you for watching.